Hey y'all, you just tuned in to Spill the Spirituality, your weekly shot of wonder, wisdom, and what the hell is going on here.
Every week, dive with us into where the spiritual meets the everyday. Coffee spills, emotional ketchup bursts, divine mysteries, and light bulb moments.
So whatever your story, whether you're an atheist or agnostic or a Zen Buddhist who's also a vegan, or you're not sure or you don't care, you belong here.
I'm Jaz and Parfar, keynote speaker, mum, and blind date alumni.
And I'm Trey Hall, Christian, pastor, dog dad, and recovering alcoholic. Still, this is the podcast for big questions and spicy takes. Maybe some answers, maybe not. We never know until we get going.
Our guest this week is a vet, a podcaster, a broadcaster, and a columnist. You might have seen him on Springwatch or The One Show, or read his son on Sunday Pets column. It's only Sean McCormack.
Oh, it's so good to have you here. Sean, who is known to many as That Vet Sean. From reptiles and amphibians to birds and even big cats, his career has taken him into close contact with an extraordinary range of animals, not just observing them, but caring for them as well.
I can tell it's a good fun podcast already.
When I heard you were coming on, the first thing I wanted to ask you about, I know there's so many questions and so many things.
Yeah.
Your first job was in like exotic pets, treating exotic pets. And I would love to hit, there must be some comedy in that.
I think I could write a book, but I'm waiting. I'm waiting to write the book until I'm no longer relying on my veterinary professional, membership as an income, because it would be a spill all. Yeah, I got into some very unusual circumstances and had incredible but crazy encounters with not only domestic and exotic pets, but also my first vet job, we had 5 zoos on the books, and that was why I took it, because when I was a kid, people asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I was like, a vet or a zookeeper, and I ended up becoming a zoo vet. So I combined the two. But yeah, I treated all kinds of animals and saw all kinds of people coming through the door, and tends to be, broad brushstrokes, but if people keep exotic pets, they tend to be quite interesting characters.
Organized crime?
Yes, absolutely organized crime.
Yeah,
no, I'm not labeling all exotic pet owners, but I definitely encountered organized crime.
Can you give us one story without losing your license?
Or your life.
Or my life. Yeah, because these people were criminals, so let's tell the...
Oh, yeah, there are...
Let's go. Yeah. Let's stick it to the criminals. This is quite a dark story. Maybe it's not so cheery to start on, but I got called in the middle of the night by someone like screaming and shouting at me to come and basically do surgery on their puppy in their kitchen. They wouldn't bring it to the practice. Why, you ask? Because they wanted to get back the massive bag of cocaine that their puppy had swallowed whole.
My gosh.
And they were calling all through the night, calling me all sorts of things to try and get me to come to their kitchen and get the cocaine back rather than secure the puppy. So you do get into all kinds of mad situations. There's other more funny things, that happened, like missing my New Year's Eve celebrations with my friends because I had to do a post-mortem on a horse before it got fed to the lions and tigers at the zoo. Those kind of weird things. So like, Happy New Year, like literally knee deep inside a horse on my own in the wintertime, kind of cutting it up and taking specimens and going, what the hell has my life become, and why did I study for 8 years to do this? But yeah.
Oh, when you were a kid, is that what you were dreaming about?
That is not what I was dreaming of, and I definitely wasn't dreaming about the amount of like anal glands I had to squeeze and all the glamorous aspects of the veterinary job.
Was there something when you were a kid that captured that? Because to know you want to be a vet and a zookeeper, I used to teach 5-year-olds, and lots of them say that, but they go off the idea.
Yeah.
What was it that really drew you in and kept you there?
The early driver was, I was this unusual child who, I have 4 siblings and they're all into sports, and my dad is a sports person, and I was this strange kid that was like turning over logs and rocks looking for beetles and centipedes and catching tadpoles and, down the back of the football pitch going, there's frogs in this ditch, And I was totally fascinated with it. And I wonder if that's nature and nurture. I think it is in my family. My grandparents were very connected to their gardens and growing food, and knew about birds and knew about the land. And I think in Ireland we do have that generational connection, more so maybe than here or in other countries. So there was something there. And my dad as a child was quite interested in nature as well. I was buying books and anything I could find pre-internet days I poured over and I learned because I was fascinated. And every adult I saw was like, how do you know so much about animals? What do you want to be when you grow up? That was the standard 2 questions. And I said, oh, well, a zookeeper or a vet. And they all said, it's really, really difficult to become a vet. And I kind of took that, I think, internalized that as, you're saying I can't be a vet. Well, there's kind of a bit of a challenge there. And I locked onto it and kind of, I could be a vet. I would be a very good vet. I'm going to become a vet. Good or bad, you know, I poured my identity into that and I became a vet. But in hindsight now, knowing what I know, you know, that can be problematic. And that is why the veterinary profession is a difficult one. And there's a lot of vets really struggling, you know, with their identity and their career choice. And
because of you feel like what makes it an unusual industry or a difficult industry? I don't want to assume that I know what you're saying.
There's a lot of reasons, but I think the type of people that get selected for veterinary, because it's quite a competitive environment, are very much, you know, the academic kind of achievers, not used to failure, very perfectionist, also very empathetic, and they want to get in to help people and animals. So when they get into normal practice and you're going to fail either multiple times a day or certainly multiple times a week, that can be quite hard. And it's a difficult job. The medicine is difficult. The animals can't speak to you for one.
Yeah.
So, it's a tricky industry. And for a variety of reasons, it's got serious mental health challenges and it's got the highest suicide rate of any profession.
No.
Yeah, a lot of people are shocked.
Really?
About that.
I'm shocked by that. Let's talk about the part of veterinary medicine that most people think of, which is like taking care of pets, you know.
Yeah.
And pets are a huge part of our lives.
When I was a kid, you know, we had dogs growing up and they were the latchkey dogs. They didn't come in the house. My mum grew up with dogs and doesn't like dogs, funny enough. And she was like, okay, Tom, my dad, if you want our kids to have dogs, that's fine, but they're not coming in the house. That's my line. So the dogs lived in the garden and they had beds in the shed and we were out with them, you know, in the day. But the gate was open and they were out roaming around and playing with the kids in the neighborhood and then would come home for dinner. And nowadays, my cousin, you know, that grew up in that house, she has one of the little poo, you know, a Maltipoo or a Cavachon or one of the little new breeds, and it's spoiled, you know, it's like a child basically. So we've changed how dogs are seen in like the space of, I'd say, one generation.
When me and my husband first got a cat, we told his mum, who's from Ghana, and she said genuinely, what for, to work or to eat? Right. And I was horrified. So I'm like, neither, it has a name, but But also I was in the market, in Tootingbeck Market, and I had a giant African lang snail in my class when we had this big tank when I was teaching. So I saw some in the market and they were only £1. I thought, oh my gosh, the last one was 20. So I bought it and they were crawling all over. Put it home, put it in a cage. I said to Ed, oh, I've got you a present. He saw it and said, oh, this is great with lemon. And I was horrified because it was obviously being sold as food. But in my mind, that is a pet. It depends what your understanding of what animals are for.
It's a very privileged position that we're in the West to have pets. You know, I've changed my views in some ways being a vet and being very much, before my veterinary degree, I studied animal science and animal welfare. And the whole concept of pets, you know, actually can be kind of challenged or challenging when you think about ethics and welfare and what is this animal for, and are we bending this animal, whether it's a pet or a horse that you do show jumping with or whatever, you know, our companion animals, are they fulfilling their needs in life, or are they fulfilling our needs emotionally?
Do they have freedom? And
do they have freedom? Yeah,
to be their own, in their own nature.
Are they allowed to express their natural behaviors? Exactly. A lot of the time, no. Oh, we're getting very deep, guys, already.
Well, we like that. We like that.
Let's go.
I was just thinking about, like, you know, it's so easy in the West to like make fun of other cultures that do eat animals that we would think of as pets. So, like, you know, it was back in the States, racist jokes about like people, East Asian folks, and eating dogs and how silly that is. You know, it's easy to make fun of. I don't mean condonable, but like you can see. But then, you know, a friend of mine's just gone to she's Indian, gone back home to India, and the cows roam the streets there because they're sacred. And I was just like, you know, it's this I don't say it's the same thing, because it's actually not, but there's a similar dynamic here. Like, why is it that we eat mass produced cattle, cows who have, you know,
wants and needs and
have a nature to express that's beyond serving our filet mignon or whatever. You know, Jaz and I are both vegetarians. Just so you don't have to be on the podcast. But, but
we don't let people.
It's a really interesting topic. It relates back to speciesism, why is it acceptable for us to eat chicken and pigs and sheep and cows, but treat dogs and cats in a certain way and be horrified if any other culture eats those animals as well? I'm not a vegetarian, but I have interesting thoughts about, meat eating and carnivory or omnivory. And I'm a biologist, so I'm kind of, we have evolved to be omnivores, and there are certain things that you can get from animal-based products that are difficult, not impossible to get from plant-based.
Yeah. It's true.
But what I would always say is, obviously being privileged enough, to get the education I did, I can see nuance where maybe some other people don't. And I'm very much, if I'm going to eat any animal products, it needs to be a higher welfare than the average, or it needs to be part of a regenerative agriculture system where animal inputs are needed to grow plant foods and things like that. So it's complex. But speciesism. We don't have the right to cast our nose up at other cultures for doing things when we're, as a culture, consuming vast quantities of meat. And here's where I struggle with the kind of like absolutism of veganism, where they're like, no animal consumption or use at all. Often owning pets, where I'm like, that's not very vegan. You're utilizing pets there for your own. So there's gray areas. But I do struggle with the kind of dogmatic veganism where they say, if you ever eat a single iota of meat, you're terrible. Not terrible person, but you're not vegan.
Wow.
Or you have to reset yourself back at day zero of your vegan journey. And
Lord.
No, guys. There are ways to eat a balanced diet that do less harm, more harm. And I heard a brilliant phrase. I can't remember where I heard it, but someone said, look, the sickness in our society and the issues with meat consumption is that nobody needs to eat a double quarter pounder with cheese for a snack. We need to respect where animals come from and what we do to animals to get food on our plates, and we don't need to overconsume meat, which is a huge environmental issue. It's the overconsumption and the reckless consumption of whatever meat and not giving a crap where it came from.
A colleague of mine, a friend of mine, collegial friend, works for DEFRA. Yeah. And he's a Christian, quite an evangelical Christian, but a vegan. Yeah. And is so gentle and loving, and it says all the things you just said, like wants to help people make better choices and not to, But his whole thing, I was like, well, I'm vegetarian. He's like, do you eat eggs and milk? And I was like, I do, because I wanted the protein, that kind of thing. He's like, actually, when it comes to animal welfare, it's much more consistent to eat beef in this country than it is to eat dairy and chicken eggs because of the humane killing of cows versus the killing of chicks.
Well, it's not even necessarily just the humane killing, it's how they're raised and are they having natural lives. So beef has got an awful reputation because of two main things. One is, in North America, beef is raised on feedlots in horrible conditions, and they never set foot on a grass field, and they're fed on grains, which is an unnatural, diet, and they're living in their own filth in massive, big, huge, awful polluting compounds. And then obviously the deforestation in South America to make way for beef and the rise in, meat consumption all over the world. Actually, in Ireland and Britain, the way we produce cattle, the way we produce beef and lamb, those animals live a very natural life outdoors and live in a herd kind of society, natural groupings, have social cohesion and social interaction with their own kind. They express normal behaviors. They're born fairly naturally most of the time. Whereas dairy cattle really have a difficult time and are quite industrialized. Chickens and pigs, don't get me started. It's pretty much concentration camps unless you're going for the very high-end, high welfare systems. Yeah. So actually, there's the contradiction. We talk about it's not the cow, it's the how. Because, people just say, beef is the worst for the environment. Where are you in the world? Yeah. Which beef? What are you talking about? Actually, grass-fed beef and lamb is definitely higher welfare and less impactful on the environment than dairy or eggs. There's never an easy answer.
No, and that's what makes it a real conversation. Because if there's an easy answer, we'll have a conversation about it. It's just like there's a right answer, it's a wrong answer. Sorry, Jaz, you wanted to come in.
Well, I was thinking, because we don't see it, do we? Like the production of stuff. When I was teaching, we'd do topics like harvest, and we're like, where is this from? And kids wouldn't know that potatoes came from underground, and when they found out, they'd be quite grossed out by it. So there's a removal between where we are and our connection with just nature in general. the scope of your work and your interests and the way you've opened doors for people, one of them is around that whole thing of how much nature is around us, even in a place where we don't feel like there is any. We're in the inner city, but there's so much nature around us. Do you think we have an understanding, if we're not in the countryside all the time, of how much nature is actually around us?
I don't think we do. And it's a great point. And I think that goes back to the point of like, why has the role of dogs changed in our homes? Or, you know, why are we so detached from where our food comes from? Well, it goes back to what I said about like my grandparents. Whenever I went to visit them as a kid, I went out the back and I went down to their greenhouse and I ate a tomato off their tomato bush, and they made rhubarb pie or a crumble out of the rhubarb they'd just pulled from the garden. Or they came to visit us. There was a bucket full or basket full of like veg and fruit from their garden. They all grew food in their garden. My mum and dad, when I was young, I do remember them like growing some things in the garden. Like there was still that slight connection still there with my mum and dad's generation to where your food came from. I've got ground, I've got a garden. I don't have to just fill it with like, you know, ornamental flowers from the garden centre. I'll grow some food. Like we've got a big family. So I think, yeah, it is something that we have in a very short space of time. Food has become so industrialised. We've become so urbanised, and we're living in a technological age. Kids have become so detached from nature and where, you know, where we fit in it, because we are part of nature. I'm always saying this, you know, we're not detached, but modern lives mean we are. And then kids don't know where a potato comes from or how a strawberry grows on a little plant that they could have on their window box or balcony. You know, that's really sad, isn't it, that we've become so detached? So maybe the dog as child thing is something in us that is harking back to that need to connect to nature, the natural world, animals. We're biophilic species. We're meant to be in nature. It calms us down. It levels us. It reduces our cortisol. It gives us our feel-good hormones. You know, I went out this morning, I woke up early and I was like, I could just have a lie-in, or it's glorious out. I'm going to go for a walk by the river. And I don't often make myself do it. But when I do it, I was like, that is the start to the day that I need.
Amen.
And I saw a new warbler species of bird that has just arrived in from Africa, that first of the year, I'm like, oh, spring is really underway because this little bird is here now. And I just slowed down and I was tempted to pull out my phone and start to do some life admin or emails, and I was, put your phone away. But I recorded the little bird, so I allowed myself to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, just that connection to nature is getting lost, and we're becoming a sicker society for it, I think.
I mean, you mentioned there walking by the river, and that when I'm in London, that's what I'm always seeking to do. I feel this incredible pull towards water, and it's like there's this healing. Something happens in you just being around, you know, a body of water or the ocean or a river. But you also mentioned Ealing wildlife, and you have got a fun and interesting idea of reintroducing beavers. It's an odd thing to be passionate about. What does it represent apart from sort of, well, and as well of ecological?
Yeah. So it's not an idea. We've done it. Yeah. We have the Ealing Beaver Project. So, awesome. Yeah, we brought a family of beavers from Scotland to a little nature reserve kind of area next to a retail park in urban Greenford in London. So they're in Zone 4 of London. They're 6 minutes walk from the Greenford tube station on the Central Line. There's the first urban and publicly accessible beaver reintroduction project in Britain. And it's gone fantastically well. They've been in there for 2.5 years now. There's a number of reasons why we brought them there, but one of the fundamental ones that got it over the line was looking at the human-centric reason.
Of course.
Which is, we had a flooding problem in urban Greenford downstream of this place called Paradise Fields. And the council were thinking about doing massive engineering works to Paradise Fields to put in reservoirs, hold more water and try and slow the flow when we had flash flood events. And we said, hang on, beavers will do that for you at a fraction of the cost, probably much better than we're able to with our diggers and machinery, and give you green credentials, Ealing Council, tick box, exercise, and, you know, be pioneering that, you know, we need to welcome nature back. And nature has the solutions to a lot of the problems we've caused by canalising our rivers and sending them into pipes underground and everything. So we brought beavers back to look at how they would alleviate urban flooding, improve the habitat and biodiversity in there for other species. And really the most important one was to bring people, urban communities who maybe don't have a lot of access to nature, people who don't even have gardens, you know, to say there's this amazing magical green space that's about to transform on your doorstep through a family of industrious rodents, you know. And this is a species that we wiped out in Britain. It was extinct, but now It's 6 minutes away from your local tube station. Go see it. And they've done incredible things at a rate of knots that we just didn't anticipate. The whole place has been brought back to life. They have alleviated urban flooding. David Attenborough, just before Secret Garden came out in January on New Year's Day, it was Wild London, a 1-hour documentary he did. And boyhood dream come true. I worked with him last summer on that show as wildlife consultant. And I put harvest mice into his hand to release, and I got him to see our beavers. And just working alongside him was absolutely amazing. But the things he said about it, you know, he said, if one family of beavers can do all of this in this tiny little corner of London, that I would have said, you were bonkers if you ever told me would happen in my lifetime. He said, if one little family of beavers can do this, what does it say to us about welcoming nature back into our cities and towns? You know, 83% of us in England live in towns and cities. So nature is not just for the rural countryside or the mountains and highlands of Scotland or the Amazon or, you know, the Serengeti. It's for us everywhere. We have to welcome nature back. We have to learn to coexist. They're doing what 12 million years of evolution has allowed them to do, honed them to do, and they're doing it very well, and they're doing it better probably than we could do it. It is crazy.
So just want to shift it a little bit to, you know, it's a podcast. It's called Spill the Spirituality.
Yes.
And I think we've been talking about deeply spiritual things already. But I was saying in a previous conversation, I love to get out of the city and go to so-called wild places. And so last week I was on a little island off the coast of South Wales for a week of retreat, really.
Lundy?
And Caldey.
Oh, yes.
Caldey Island off of Tenby Bay.
Nice, yeah.
And two experiences. One is just sitting on this cliff in this cave where they found bones and human skulls from 30,000 years ago, because there didn't used to be a sea there. It used to be a sort of a savanna. Yeah. So you're thinking, for 30,000 years, humans have been in this very cave, and watching the Fulmars come in and do these infinity circle 8s over and I'm just watching this and thinking, not only I feel so, I am connected to these birds and they to me, but then there's lots of dramatic cliffs on Caldey, and so I found this rope, this sort of almost like abseiling down the thing to this bay where the seals were.
Okay.
And I got down to this little seal colony, and as I landed on the beach, they scattered into the ocean and sort of watched me, you know. But as I sat there quiet for an hour, they came back onto the beach and cautiously welcomed me, and then felt like they really welcomed me. The seal pups were sort of playing like 10 feet from my feet, sort of playing. And I was just sitting there thinking, we're participating in this space, in this cosmos. They have seen me. I have seen them. It just felt like this incredibly dense spiritual experience, like it's incredibly concentrated. Like you don't get that where I live.
No.
So for me, that's a spiritual experience of another creature who's not a human. And I wondered for you, in all the stuff you've been talking about, and others, do you think of any of this as a spiritual enterprise or not?
Yeah, great question. And obviously I've thought about it coming on the podcast.
You're a good student.
we, you know, I mentioned there, didn't I, like 12 million years of evolution. Well, would some people say, or God, you know, God's design or the great design or whatever you believe in. We can get into, you know, religion versus spirituality, but yeah, I've reflected on that. Would I consider myself a traditional spiritual person? No, I wouldn't. Do I believe in God the way most people believe God exists? No, I don't. Do I label myself in some category of, you know, belief system? No. And I think that my spirituality, if I have to describe it, is really based on nature, and the planet kind of knows what it's doing, and I am a small part of that. So you looking at those seals or standing on a giant cliff with all these seabirds wheeling around that have been wheeling around for millions of years as well. We're a tiny little, you know, 70 to 80 year old blip in the system, in the cosmos, and we can sometimes feel that we're very, very, very important. But I think what nature does for me, and this maybe is part of my spirituality, is that I'm not hugely significant, but for the time that I'm here, I feel my purpose is to be as good a person I can be to leave the planet for the next person along. And the connection that I get, and the grounding, and the wonder, the sense of wonder that I get from nature, is that the world is this infinitely complex and beautiful place. And whether you believe that God made that all in a day, or that evolution went from single-celled organisms right up to the complexity of the human brain and all it can do, it doesn't matter to me.
Or both.
Or both, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter to me. And I think there's a great peace that I get from my connection with nature, which is I'm part of it, I'm part of the system. And maybe I'm not more important than that seal, you know. And Trey, I've got to chastise you a little bit for going too close to the seals to make them scatter.
Oh dear.
You shouldn't go too close. If they scatter, they're expending energy, and then someone else might do the same, and then pups go without milk for a couple of hours and things. So top tip.
Thank you for that.
That's all right.
I don't think I've ever been I've never been corrected on the podcast before, but I welcome this.
No, I've just...
I think I correct you a lot. You just don't listen.
Don't count. No, really, that's helpful because
I was writing a blog article.
It's very human-centric of me to be like, they really wanted me on that beach.
Yeah, it's like, I'm going to go and have a spiritual experience with the seals, but they're going to take half an hour to like get over their little adrenaline boost and their shock, and the babies are like, "Where's mom? And I'm hungry." Yeah.
Oh
so
my God!
Let's
those
try
babies
and
are alive.
Respect wild animals' space. I've just written a blog post on this, which is why it's front of mind. I was like, shall I say it to him or shall I not?
I'm so glad you did. This will be cut out of the podcast. This will be
That's
edited.
gone.
This will be edited
That's
out
on
anyway.
the floor.
John, make a note. No.
How dare he correct me? Who does he think he is?
That's so helpful because I mean
we put ourselves first as a species
absolutely.
all the time, and I don't think we
Yeah.
should. We are part of the ecosystem.
I think there are lots of folks who would be on board with, not that they need to be on board with, but would be like, yeah, we're all connected, but also see the human creature as something that is not better, but more evolved. And for example, I eat animals, you know, I clearly have a value of animals that is key, but not as high as my value for humans. And that's just is. Otherwise, I wouldn't eat animals at all, right? So I value them in different ways. So I have a sense of the old medieval philosophers talked about the chain of being, and I've got all kinds of problems with that for all kinds of reasons. But I do wonder: is it possible to be a nature mystic and to really reverence and want ecological healing, and also have a sense that human beings actually are the pinnacle of creation, or more than a blip?
I think it depends on what your sort of philosophy is on where humans fit and what nature is, and are humans superior to the other animals, non-human animals? Because humans are animals, so
humans are animals.
We talk about humans and non-human animals if we want to. There's a few different philosophies you can have from a kind of animal ethics or animal welfare point of view. You could have a respect for nature view, where you see that we're part of the ecosystem, and actually there's a reverence, as long as it's respectful, in being part of the food chain. And some of our nature and our design is we're part of the ecosystem, and we're omnivores, and we can eat animals with respect. I have friends who raise their own animals and kill, slaughter, whatever way you want to put it, their own animals for subsistence, and are extremely respectful of those animals, their welfare, and the produce that they produce, that they result in. You can have a animal rights view, where you think that sorry, but we are not superior in any way, and we have no right to kill or to harness an animal against its will. You can have a very utilitarian view of animal welfare is a spectrum, and we want to minimize harms and unnecessary suffering, but we can also utilize animals in a way that's beneficial to us. There's ecosystems where we're on the menu as well, and we have to respect that, instead of thinking, oh my God, how dare that lion eat that safari person on a walk in the bush at night. Well, no, you put yourself there. A lion's going to eat you. So there's various ways to look at it. I think one of the reasons we've fallen so far away from looking after the planet and feeling connected and all the damage we're doing, I think a fundamental part of it that fascinates me and perplexes me, but also really, really frustrates me, is this idea that only human interests matter. And, growth at all costs matters. And we are here to just extract and take and do whatever the hell we like. And the world is burning. And, well, that doesn't matter because I won't be here when it actually burns to the ground, you know. I think it's that detachment and that superiority complex that we have as a species. You know, on a micro level, I was talking the other day about Mow May. Don't cut your lawn in May. Allow the pollinators and the flowers to come, and you'll have a little ecosystem. And then go in and like mow it in June.
Then mow it
and kill
down.
everything.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's such a weird thing. We're just conditioned by society to have like dominion and neat and tidy and straight lines, and think that like if we do this one little thing, we're brilliant. But actually, like the society we live in, we're just consuming and destroying all the time. So I think we do need to get back to this idea that we cannot continue to just extract and destroy and treat nature as like, yeah, that's a nice to have over there. It has to be intrinsically part of our lives. I think, didn't you have Kate Rayworth on the podcast at some point recently? And
I did.
Her model of, you know, donut economics and things is absolutely amazing. Yeah, we have to change systems. And I think it starts local, being mindful, being more mindful of everything we do and how it impacts not only our own selves, community, but our planet. We've been indoctrinated quite a lot, and we've been told that the way to live is fast, busy, take, accumulate, greed. It's greedy, and we're wasteful, and we're consumptive, and we're buying things and spending energy where it doesn't need to be spent. And I agonize over things like, I took a flight to Costa Rica and went to Costa Rica for a month in January, and I thought, I'm a hypocrite. I'm a total hypocrite. But then I'm like, okay, well, I took a month off and I arranged work and worked my butt off before Christmas to be able to take the month, because I was like, if I'm going to Costa Rica on that long flight this year, which will be the trip, I'm going to spend a month there, and I'm really going to do it properly, and I'm going to connect with nature. And I had experience of a lifetime there, you know, and I did a lot of thinking, and it was a trip with purpose. And I think that was about just being mindful of like, I'm not just going to flippantly spend, you know, all this money on a flight and go there for 5 days and come back and then go on another one in 3 months' time. And, you know, there's things like that where nobody can get it right. Nobody can get it perfect. And we're all guilted by corporations and governments that we as individuals are the cause of the planet, you know, burning. We're not. Systems need to change. And, you know, occasionally eating a double quarter pounder with cheese. Okay, fine. Like, let's not vilify those people.
Yeah.
But doing it all mindlessly all the time and not really ever caring about your impact, your personal impact. It's problematic because it's a cumulative thing everyone's doing. But B, it's detaching from your spirit and your purpose and your place on this planet. You know, that's precious.
We've been talking about your vocation as a vet, as a conservationist. And you're also your vocation as a human being. And you've spoken publicly about the loss of your partner. Who was, I think, wasn't out, and you're still have been working through that grief. What has that been like, and how do you connect that to do you connect that at all to your nature stuff?
I do. I find grief is fascinating, and death is fascinating, obviously. And I think as a vet, you know, I deal with death in my job. You know, I'm not working in clinics now, but vets have a unique insight and kind of window into how people cope with death and illness and grief. And I also think the Irish have a really, really great relationship with death and grief. Culturally and historically, we as a nation and a culture, we don't necessarily fear death, I think, as other cultures do. I've lived in various places. I've lived in Canada and I've lived in the UK a long time, and I have lots of friends from all over the world, and I talk about this a lot. The Irish attitude towards death is that it's really part of life, and I think that comes from like pre-Christian times, you know, what's ingrained into us genetically, you know, as a tribe, if we want to talk like that. There is a healthy respect for us coming from the earth and being part of the earth and going back to the earth afterwards. And growing up, you know, as a kid in Ireland, death wasn't something that we were shied away from or protected from. We saw, you know, our grandparents or family members, you know, occasionally die, or a neighbour would die. And there's a really great tradition in Ireland to wake the dead, where you go into the home and the person is there in the casket open, and there's a celebration of their life, and it's a party, like.
Yeah. Whilst around them, basically.
Yeah, they're open, and people are in and out of the room and paying their respects and putting their hand on their hand and giving them a kiss on the head or whatever, and then going into the kitchen where the women are making tea and sandwiches, and then the drinks come out later on, and there's music and there's storytelling. You know, storytelling is massive in Ireland because it was a very much an oral culture all along. And we have this incredible, you know, peace with that person was old and died, or even that person is young and it's tragic and they died, but like, let's talk about them, let's celebrate it. Everyone goes to them, goes to the family, and it's a social, cohesive moment, and it's a very dear moment. And whether it's a religious family and there's a priest there coming to say the prayers, which still happens sometimes, or whether it's completely detached from church and religion, the neighbours, the friends, everyone in that person's life tries to go there and give their respects to the family and tell a story about the person and honour them. And that is beautiful, you know. And I've been there. My first grandmother died in our home. You know, she didn't go to hospital. She was in our home for 2 weeks dying. And I saw her dying when I was 13 maybe. And it was an amazing, beautiful family experience to be privileged enough to have her there in the comfort of our home to die. And then my next grandmother, my dad's mother, I watched her die in her deathbed. I was there. And it was a beautiful experience. And I think being a vet, you know, one was way before I was and one was after. There's a healthy respect for death, and there's a real sense that giving an animal or a person a respectful, comfortable death that honours them is a beautiful thing and a real privilege to be able to do. And I would say, and people go, what? You know, a lot of people say, I didn't become a vet because I could never put an animal to sleep. And I will often say, it's probably one of the most privileged parts of the job that you can do it, because although you're alleviating that animal suffering, you're also counselling and helping that family come to terms with that end point and when it should be. And you're giving them a great experience. And the most common time when you get a card or a gift from a client as a vet is when you've given their animal a nice death. You know? So personally in my life, like, I have experienced quite a bit of death, unfortunately, with friends and with partner. And my attitude towards it, I think the first time it happened with a friend who was my age, and they died of brain hemorrhage, and I just thought it was the most unfair thing in the world ever. And my dad was kind of a bit flippant or casual about it, and I thought, how are you being so casual about it? And later on, like, as it happened again, I kind of thought, look, I can't explain it. I don't need to explain it. That's not what's going to give me comfort. What gives me comfort is they were a good person. I was connected with them. I had a good time with them, and I was privileged to know them. And if now's their time, through God or some other force or just coincidence, that's it. That's fine. And I think that being a vet and being connected to nature and the natural world and thinking of me as part of ecology and nature, and I'm energy now and I'm going to be energy that goes back into the system when I die, that's given me a really great ability to cope with it. Losing a partner who wasn't out, very, very tricky thing.
Because the grieving is...
The grieving was in secret. For a very long time. And I haven't talked about this much publicly, apart from my Costa Rican trip monologue to the camera that I posted online, because I was sick of grieving in secret, and I was sick of not being able to say his name, and I won't say his name publicly, but I was kind of sick of still being here several years later, stuck in grief. And I went to a therapist about it, and he just said, look, what you're going through, secretly grieving someone and not being part of that send-off and that ritual that we need as a society, as a species, we're not designed to grieve in secret. We're designed, and culture, every culture has traditions around sending off the dead and saying goodbye to people, and I got none of that. So I think it held on a much longer time, and there was a sense of, like, if I talk about him, I'm outing him, which felt awful. But actually, the time I started healing, probably 2 years after, went through a terrible time, but the only time I started healing was when I started talking about him. and saying his name to close friends, but just not saying nothing to other people. Like, how are you? What's going on? What's been going on in your life? Yeah, nothing, fine. Work is good. Normal. Actually say people, that I haven't seen in a while. Hey, how are you, Sean? Well, I'm all right, but it's been a rough couple of years because I haven't really talked about this before, but I am now. Partner died, and it was not an orthodox relationship. A lot of it was behind closed doors, and his family didn't know, and that's made it really difficult. Whew, do you know what?
Yeah.
That wasn't so bad.
Yeah.
There's a weight off my shoulders, and actually talking about him now, I feel is like honouring him and honouring what we had. Yeah. And my sister and my mum, who were two of the first people to know, they said, like, as mothers, they would just like to know that although his sexuality was secret and there was an element of shame around it, they would be delighted to know that actually he did have someone that he could express himself with.
Yeah.
So that's given me a lot of peace. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. So
no worries.
Thank you, John. I when I saw the post when it came out and was kind of sobbing along with everyone else and connecting with it, but on my way over, I read Kathy Burke's memoir, the comedian. Well, she's not really a comedian; she's kind of an actor, director, but is known for doing Perry, Fenwick, and Waynetta.
Yeah.
And she wrote a story of something very similar where she had met a friend and they'd been friends for years and they were all together laughing and they're like, what's up with you? You're miserable. And he said exactly that. I've been in a relationship. It wasn't conventional. And he passed away, and I feel like it's almost like he didn't exist because I can't talk about it with anyone. And as they were talking, it transpired that he had been Kathy Burke's drama, film and studies tutor at university or at college years before. And she describes this amazing moment where there's just a knownness between them. They didn't go on to be friends, but she says that they would often bump into each other. Yeah. And she would say to him, Jack sends his love. Oh. And he would say to her, he sends it to you too. I'm getting emotional, right? Because it's hard enough. Losing someone is hard enough. But to not have the ritual and the connection and the collective moving through something, I applaud you for going to therapy because, there's years of human doing and being that we don't have access to because we're only here for a short period of time. So to tap into it and actually give yourself that release. And I think sharing it was a really brave thing to do, but just a really kind thing to do for other people who are, have experienced any sort of situation that's connected with that.
Thank you. Yeah.
You honor someone by holding them, and we die when we die, but we also continue to live on in people's memories and stories. So yeah, I just think it's love after love that we know it has existed in that video that you did.
Thank you. Yeah. I again agonized over doing that, over recording that video or a video like that for ages and ages before, and I was away on my own, and I did want some time to detach from normal life and reflect on what was important and things like that. And I just had a rough night the night before where I was just really, really sad and crying. And it's like, we're like 3 years later, and I still have this deep pain inside me to get out. I can feel it building sometimes, and I can feel it in my chest and then in my neck and then in my face. And I'm like, I think I need to release this somehow. And often it's, late at night and having a cry and whatever. But I'd had a rough night the night before, and I was walking in the forest, and I was doing my usual, nature content videos, or about to do my nature content videos.
Here's a sloth.
There's an incredible frog over here, And I was just like, I'm not in the mood to talk to the internet about an incredible frog over here. Do you know what? I'm just going to record it. It never needs to go anywhere. I'm not going to do anything with it necessarily. But I just recorded it on that walk because that was it. That was all that's on my mind. And I did break composure at one point in time to go, there's an incredible frog over there. But I posted it then on my Instagram several days later because I was like, there's no shame in this. There was shame holding me back. There was concern or, care for his memory and things like that. And maybe people putting two and two together. But I was like, this is all I can think about. And I had previously posted some smaller snippet about grief and something I'd read about grief, and it made me cry, and I just recorded it in the moment to put it on. And the reaction to it, you know, with people who follow my Instagram account were like, oh my God, I'm so glad you said that, or I think so too. And I just saw that actually speaking about grief can be so powerful for others to know they're not alone. And I was like, I felt alone for the last 3 years in this, you know, and actually, do you know, I'm just going to post it and see what happens. And I posted it, and the reaction again was incredible. And, you know, I couldn't get to everyone. I couldn't reply to everyone, but, you know, I felt the love, and I felt, okay, you use the word collective, you know, it is really important that we grieve together. And I didn't get that. And I think actually just by putting it out there, I got some of that, and I was able to move on. And I honestly, that one thing definitely has pushed things forward and made things a lot better. In terms of where I am now. I'm, you know, I can think about him now and just think, what a wonderful thing that I had for all those years, you know? Yeah.
You come across, and I don't know you personally, but as a very emotionally in touch and connected person.
I think I am that way. And this wasn't the first time I'd been to therapy, by the way. Like, rewind the clock, you know, I grew up gay in Ireland, you know, Catholic Ireland, and although my parents weren't religious and kind of dropped that a little bit, when all the scandals came out in the Catholic Church in Ireland, I've seen Ireland change a lot in my lifetime. But when I was growing up as a teenager in a Catholic boys' school, gay, I was like in denial and self-preservation mode, in denial. No, I can't be. It's just phase, you know, all this kind of thing. So I learned to like internalize a lot and keep things to myself, and to like edit myself quite a lot. And I knew from that, you know, I was quite in touch with myself and how I felt, or my mental well-being, although I didn't have the language for it as a teenager. I you know, was quite in tune with myself, and I was always quite in tune with other people. When I came out to my mum and dad, I was 18, and my mum was shocked. And at the dinner table, you know, kitchen table. Yeah, I know. Do you have eyes in your head, Carol McCormack?
Come on, Carol. Come
on, Carol. No, I was pretending quite well, apparently. The first thing my dad said to Carol was, Carol, come on now. We've always known that Sean's been a sensitive child. You know, so I took that as, oh, what do you mean by that? You know, but I was a sensitive child. I was quite in tune with people. I was quite gregarious and kind, and maybe the, you know, love of animals and things like that. So later on, I just think I was in tune with who I was, and I was quite independent because I kind of had to be, because I kept it to myself until I was an adult, and then felt the confidence to come out. I went through like another whole coming out, which was I became a vet, and it was like my entire identity. The gay thing was fine, you know, that's all good. But now I'm a vet, and I'm 6 years into clinical practice, and you know what? I hate this. You know, I went through a massive period of burnout and a career wobble where I was like, I'm in a windowless room with fluorescent lighting for the last 3 years, dealing with everyone's crisis on a constant 10-minute rotation of a lot of pampered pets. And I was thinking, why did I study for 8 years to be here now, 6 years into my career? I'm sick of talking to the next Cocker Spaniel owner whose Cocker Spaniel has an ear infection, because we've bred the dogs to have big, massive, floppy ears that don't let any air in, and then the next dog that comes in is a pug that can't really breathe well, and if I mention it to the owner, they get defensive, and I'm like, I just don't agree fundamentally with how we've bred pugs, you know. And I was like, what am I doing here? So I had this really period of burnout, and compassion fatigue is part of that. And this is all tied into the mental health kind of issues of the veterinary profession and the tendency towards suicide if things are not great. Euthanasia is seen by vets as a good thing, you know, a positive welfare outcome. I knew all that, and I was very dialed in, and I was like, I'm suffering with my mental health more than I have when I was, you know, coming out as gay or in the closet as gay. I'm going down a path that lots of vets go down, but I'm wise enough and wary and aware enough to go, okay, I need to intervene here myself. So I went and spoke to a charity called Vet Life, and I talked to them about other careers, and I was like, my whole identity's tied up in being a vet. What else can I do if I'm not a vet? And I took that active step to not go down that darker road and not kind of exacerbate those issues. So I think I always have been quite, you know, dialed in, and I can see it and sense it in other people as well, I think.
It comes across and just what you just said there. I mean, loads of folks who listen to this podcast, maybe a sliver of them will be vets, so they won't need to think about leaving the vet profession. But I think what you've just described is archetypal for lots and lots of people, which is, maybe that's what archetype means. But there comes a point as you grow up where some of the choices that you've made or the personality structures that you find yourself living within won't take you where you need them to, you know, job wise, what you just described, perfect example. This is killing me. You know, this is death dealing, not because it's bad in itself, but just for you. So how did you, I mean, it takes so much courage, I think, and humility to say, I need help, or I need to consider a different path than the one I've invested in since I was a kid, right? That's why there's so much investment. And not just for the person, but like your family, if you have dependents, all that kind of stuff. So you're not a life coach, but you know, what's your advice for, I mean, I think Jaz and I in our own ways have had those experiences of pursuing a certain path and then realizing not because the path is bad, just because it's not
for you.
So what's your advice for folks, vet or otherwise, who might be awake to that discontent?
My advice to myself in hindsight would have been to just listen to that voice sooner and not be afraid of it. If there was a pressure, what will my family think? You know, my parents did support me through my vet studies, financially and otherwise. And again, my identity was tied up in it. But I can't take full credit. I was having stomach issues as well as all this discontent and woe and what am I going to do? And I went to the doctor about my stomach, and the doctor must have sensed it in me and was asking me about clinical life as a vet and how are your clients, and could sense my frustration. And I opened up to the doctor because I was like, well, he understands the patient doctor dynamic and how it works when you're behind a closed door, isolated even from your own colleagues, you know, because you're just on this conveyor belt of like solving people's problems really quick. And I was like, no one's solving my problems. That was a big thing. And the problem, the physical manifestation was I was having stomach issues. And I went to him about that. And he said, I think it's not a stomach issue. I think you're stressed. And I think it's largely to do with work. Would that be a fair assessment? And I was like, yeah, I definitely am. And I was kind of flipping it away. And he said, has anything happened at work that, you're not proud of, or that you've got in trouble for, or anything like that? And I said, not yet, but I did very almost tell a client to fuck off the other day. Very, very nearly.
Warning sign.
I certainly muttered it under my breath when I closed that door. I was just like, I am done with you people, you know. And I was like, I said, I did nearly tell this person, and you know, there's been a few little things. And he said, I'm signing you off work for 2 weeks. And I was like, no, you can't. You know, the practice will fall down without me, or that they'll be under pressure. Like, it's only a 2.5 vet practice, and I can't be signed off for 2 weeks. Yes, you can. You're a medic, and if your foot was broken, you wouldn't be going to work. If your hand was broken, you wouldn't be doing surgery. Right now, you're burnt out. Your brain is not coping. Your mind is not coping very well, and it's physically manifesting elsewhere. So I think what I would say to people, if they're having those doubts, whether they're in your relationship or your work life or family dynamics or something, if it's affecting your physical or mental well-being, listen to that voice sooner rather than later. Don't let it drag on. And don't keep it to yourself. You know, it's such a cliche to say, you know, problem shared is a problem halved. But honestly, just everything I've learned throughout my life and all the trials and tribulations that have gone on, speaking about it with somebody close or not close is just an absolute burden off.
You're only as sick as your secrets, we say in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's so trite but so true. Really.
So I'd say listen to your inner voices telling you that something's not right, and talk to someone about it first, professionally or otherwise.
We have talked a long time, and I feel like each segment of this podcast, varying it from domestic pets to nature conservancy and spirituality to your own experience of grief, could it be its own podcast. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to honor the time, but thank you so much for being here.
Just before we end as well, I'm not a card-carrying member of any of this organisation.
Jaz is going to distinguish herself now. Yeah.
No, I do, because I always feel like I always worry people will take that away. But these conversations and the different people we had in it, and particularly this one with you, Sean, it just brings this other dimension of that connection beyond us being on the planet at the same time. So I just wanted to thank you for being part of that, and and sharing yourself with us, because it truly has been a beautiful episode and conversation.
We have people with religious difference on. That's the name of the show, right? That's the name of the game. What I love about the way you talk about it is one of the things that challenges me in the vast emporium of spiritualities on offer these days, and thank God for that in many ways, is how many of them are so self-centered. And masquerade as health-giving, life-giving things, but they're actually just games of the self, to my opinion. And God will work through them, and in my opinion, and look, there's Christianities that are have the same problem. But what I like about you, whether you identify as a godless heathen or not, is there seems to be in the, I'll call it the spiritual sense that I get of you, is that you may be an atheist, or I don't know how you identify, but there seems like an openness to something other than you,
for sure.
Whatever you name that. That's really, to me really interesting in a way that people watching themselves be amazing as individuals is less interesting. So
I didn't say it, when I talked about my being in the room when my grandmother died. My grandmother was a devout Catholic and went to Mass every morning. And I did go through a period of time, where I felt very rejected by the church and demonized and things. And I was quite angry at the church. But I do have to say that I do admire and respect people's faith, whatever it is. It's just not mine, And there's so many kind of colors and shades out there for people to kind of choose from and to identify with. So I do admire it. But yeah, my church is the natural world. And I was going to say earlier, it's like, what does that make me? Am I an atheist? Am I a naturist? And I'm like, no, that's another thing.
Might be that
That's
too.
a different hobby. Yeah.
You're a disciple of the prophet David Attenborough.
Yes. Yeah. And co-worker now. Let's go with that.
There we go, co-worker. If you're listening, Sir David Attenborough, happy birthday to you.
And have a look at Wild London on BBC iPlayer.
Yes.
I feature for about 3 seconds.
And
my moment of fame.
Where the timeline is like...
It's towards the end. It's the best bit, obviously.
The end. Maybe that's where I saw you, actually. Thanks so much, those of you who are listening or watching on our new YouTube channel. Thanks so much for joining us. You can follow Sean on Instagram at ThatVetSean.
Spill of Spirituality is always on with new content every single week, so please subscribe if you haven't already, and do give us a review wherever you find us.
This podcast is a project of the Methodist Church in Britain. Our producers are Rachel Matthews and John Ryan. I'm Trey Hall.
And I'm Jaz and Parfar. Until next time, peace.